bird flu is back in central Nebraska as the highly contagious avian influenza that's been popping up across the country marks its return to central Nebraska. We look at the latest cases and the larger trend of what it means for consumers, as reduced poultry numbers means fewer eggs and higher prices. And after farmers pushed one president to do more, they might need to ask this president to show some restraint as we wait and see on trade.
We grow more than we can use here in the United States, and so trade is super important for us.
Later, honor a meat pioneer who helped bring us the McRib. It's time to grow. Avian influenza, that highly contagious virus, makes its return to Nebraska. Thanks for joining us. I'm Steve White. We kick off Grow this week with Gary Robinson Jr. in Kearney County.
What is it? Where does it come from? And could it potentially impact you at home? The bird flu, also known as HPAI, is a highly contagious virus that spreads easily among birds through nasal and eye secretions, including infected food, water, and manure.
Wild birds, infected poultry, any equipment that you're using with those animals, clothing and shoes of caretakers may all carry the virus.
The bird flu can also be spread to humans, but at the time of this report, there have been no human cases identified. Still, that doesn't mean we're out of the woods, with two rivers saying to watch out for these symptoms.
Fevers, chills, pink eye, cough, sore throat, runny nose, body aches, headaches, fatigue. Occasionally you may have vomiting and diarrhea.
So far, these cases have only been detected in backyard flocks, not commercial flocks. And the Nebraska State veterinarian, Dr. Roger Dudley, says this is primarily spread from ducks and geese into poultry species during migratory timeframes.
This year, the migration was actually a little later than normal, and that's why we didn't start seeing detections until December and January.
Dudley also says that they prevent the spread of the infected birds by depopulating them to prevent them from contaminating backyard or commercial flocks. Also saying that even if this virus were to hit backyard flocks, it would not affect egg prices.
The backyard producers aren't producing enough eggs to impact the overall price of eggs at the grocery store.
Thanks, Gary, and thanks for pointing out this was a backyard flock, not a commercial operation, but some commercial operations around the country have been impacted, and that's resulted in higher egg prices. NTV's Jack Bartlett continues our team coverage.
The bird flu continues to harm the agriculture industry in central Nebraska. After a number of outbreaks took place across the state, some farmers are forced to slaughter entire flocks of chicken, which is causing a spike in U.S. egg prices.
If you have a widespread where all the population has to be destroyed, and that's going to affect how much is availability. So when you have the supply and looking at what the prices are, that has an impact.
In December, the average price of 1 dozen U.S. eggs costed $4.15.
We're obviously largely at the mercy of ag commodity prices every single day. So with changes to things like egg prices, it obviously squeezes our margin.
It's the biggest struggle is keeping the consumers happy so that they return. We are seeing a decline in a lot of our regular senior customers.
Darcy Kuhnel and Carrie Prince are two small business owners that both regularly use eggs in their products. They say their businesses are being impacted in different ways.
Probably the biggest thing is adjusting your menu prices.
In 2024, the Cornhusker State identified 6 cases of avian influenza, and the Lincoln Lancaster Health Department reported bird flu was found in a wastewater sample earlier this month. The average price per dozen eggs shot up in December, and this spike price is also concerning for farmers and consumers.
It's not a lose-lose for everyone. But it is tough because we do have a lot more poultry facilities coming into Nebraska, and there's a big concern when you have to depopulate a whole flock. That's a lot of birds to be destroyed.
Bird flu has been identified as the main reason for these soaring prices, and it does not look like those will be coming down anytime soon. We will continue to monitor egg prices and update you with the latest. Reporting for NTV News, I'm Jack Bartlett.
Nebraska, a top exporter of beef and corn, including the corn used in tortillas, at the center of an international dispute. This taco wouldn't be possible without Nebraska corn.
Nebraska is the #1 white corn producing state in the nation.
But Mexico's president signed a decree banning imports of genetically modified corn.
The world was watching Mexico try to shut out our corn, and Joe Biden said nothing.
Now a dispute panel has ruled in favor of American corn growers.
Really a great win for all agriculture, but beyond agriculture, great win for science-based reasoning.
Nebraska farmers agree with Congressman Adrian Smith that the Biden administration was slow to act.
I don't see Donald Trump just sitting on the sidelines trying to wait it out like we saw Joe Biden do.
The first presidency that we had with him was up and down all the time. There was some days that President Trump was our greatest advocate, and then the next day we had a road bump and kind of needed to have a little bit of some education and advocacy.
They've said they want to take a more strategic role. That's a step in the right direction.
Trump threatened tariffs against Colombia, which then threatened to retaliate.
We're going to make it known that and continue to make it known, we have in the past, that the detriment that could happen in the ag industry from retaliation on these tariffs.
Well, I'm not a fan of tariffs, to be quite honest. I also believe they need to be a tool in the toolbox.
A trade war could hit Nebraska harder than almost anywhere.
We grow more than we can use here in the United States, and so trade is super important for us.
Farmers pushed Biden to enforce trade deals. Now they may have to press Trump to show restraint. In both cases, Nebraska farmers lead the way.
Grassroots making a difference on an international.
And on Friday, the White House announced tariffs that went into effect over the weekend. President Donald Trump placing 25% tariffs on imports from Canada and Mexico and 10% tariffs on goods from China. The White House announced on Friday, but provided no word on whether there would be any exemptions to the measure that could result in swift price increases to U.S. consumers. Previously, we learned from the Nebraska Corn Board that Canada and Mexico buyers purchased more than 27% of Nebraska's corn exports, nearly 32% of Nebraska's ethanol exports, and almost 22% of our state's beef exports, making those two nations critical. Meanwhile, the group Farmers for Free Trade says China, Canada, and Mexico together are American farmers' three largest export markets. American farmers exported more than $84 billion worth of food and agriculture to these three countries in 2023, constituting nearly half of all food and egg exports. So if there's any retaliation that targets agriculture, farmers say that could be detrimental. Know some young people interested in the swine business? NTV's Deandra Kurtenbach has more.
Do you want your child to have less screen time? Are you looking for volunteer opportunities for yourself? I'm Deandra Kurtenbach for NTV News, and Nebraska Extension has opportunities to solve both of those issues.
With deadlines that are actually approaching pretty quickly. The Farrow and Own swine cohort is taking applications now to be a part of the 2025 group, and youth must be ages 8 to 18 as of January 1st of this year, and enrolled in 4-H in a Nebraska county. This cohort is kind of unique. It provides some opportunities for 4-Hers to meet other young people, participate in some learning opportunities hosted by experts in nutrition, feed, genetics, just to name a few related to swine. They also, this cohort allows them to gain knowledge related to that project and helps them to maintain records. What's new for 2025 is that they can exhibit their farrowed and owned project animal at the county fair. And so they don't necessarily have to exhibit it at the state fair, but they do have to be available to do an interview at the 2025 Nebraska State Fair. And those registrations are due February 1st. So that's something kind of unique. The other thing that we have coming up that is a very unique opportunity and kind of exciting to participate on a national level, but applications for youth to take part in the FEMA Youth Preparedness Council are taking place right now. And what that is it's an opportunity for youth in grades 8 through 11 who are interested in representing their counties or their communities on a national level. And so this council brings youth together from across the country who are passionate about emergency preparedness and making a difference in their communities. And so applications are due March 3rd for that opportunity. The Nebraska Livestock Achievement Program is designed to promote all educational aspects of 4-H livestock. And so youth can participate in that. That application deadline is not till June 15th. And so if youth want to participate in any of those opportunities, they can contact their local extension office to find out more about them.
You don't have to be a farm kid to enjoy 4-H.
Absolutely not. 4-H is for all backgrounds. You do not, it's urban, rural, it is for everybody.
No fall fertilizer. Up next, we continue our conversation about the new recommendations. Nebraska Extension puts it in black and white. Fall fertilizer no longer recommended. We continue our conversation now with Dr. Richard Ferguson. But the real change is something based on some research you've done right here in central Nebraska with the Central Plant NRD. You and I were in a field about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
We had to go back and look that up. At the time, you were installing sensors on equipment that would go through the field. Now, as that technology has been commercialized, it's changed and evolved. But conceptually, that concept now is something that producers are using. There's a company called Sentinel Fertigation, for one, that is doing this. And it would seem that the data is pretty conclusive that that's been an effective tool.
Well, the idea of using a sensor to look at the crop during the growing season, which can detect developing lack of nitrogen before our eyes can see it, has been researched at the University of Nebraska for at least 20 years. So it began to be actually commercially viable about a decade ago when we started the project you mentioned. And several natural resource districts in the state helped us get that going and demonstrate it to farmers. But an evolution in that technology has been that satellites now have the capacity, both in time, frequency, and spatial resolution, to provide information that's needed during the growing season very accurately. And so we're seeing that the use of satellite sensing technology really helps us improve both efficiency of use and profitability.
I've talked with some producers. The way they describe it, they're kind of able to spoon feed that to the crop when it needs it. Is that the idea?
That's the idea. A challenge with our prediction equations, which have existed for decades, is that we really don't know exactly what the weather will be for this field this year.
Right.
Our prediction equations are based on means, what the long-term means are for rainfall and temperature. Never is the rainfall for a field exactly what was predicted that week. It's close, probably, and across the year it's in the ballpark, but just the variation that occurs on a field within a growing season cannot be accounted for yet with prediction models, but we can do that with in-season management.
And we should take a step back. The reason we're talking about all of this is we look on a map and we look at the nitrates, the samples across the state, unfortunately, kind of lights up, especially the Platte River Valley is one of those areas where we see a lot of bright red dots, and we would like to make an impact on that situation.
University of Nebraska recommendations and those guidelines provided by NRDs like the Central Platte have the idea of first optimizing profit for the grower. But I think NRDs are also as equally focused on water quality. And the good thing is, from our research over many years, if we're optimizing profitability, we're also optimizing environmental stewardship.
Yeah.
Once you cross that line and you start to push towards maximizing yield and not necessarily maximizing profit, then that starts to allow nitrate to accumulate and move into the groundwater.
And you can find the first part of that interview on our website and also the NTV's Grow YouTube channel. Our Grow Weather Outlook is next.
Well, this week's drought monitor came out, as you can imagine, really not a whole lot of change. It has been pretty dry here across Nebraska and Kansas. Get a closer look now at the state of Kansas, where again, really not a whole lot of change. No drought, still stands roughly 35.25%. Abnormally dry still stands at 64.75%. Moderate drought is up to 25%. Now it's a slight, about 0.25% reduction compared to last week, but still good to see no severe, extreme, or exceptional drought here across the state of Kansas. But moving up north to Nebraska, still no change here as far as last week's report to this week's report. No drought, still stands roughly 2.4%. Abnormally dry, this stands about the other 97.6% there. Moderate drought still stands roughly 88.75%. Severe drought still at 46%. And the extreme drought, which still in the panhandle, northern parts of the state, represents about 8.16% precisely for that category. But no exceptional drought still across Nebraska. Looking at your temperature outlook still for the month of February, of course we are in that now, still looking at slightly below normal temperatures for northern and eastern parts of Nebraska. The southwest corner of Kansas maybe looking at slightly above average temperatures, otherwise the rest of us looking pretty seasonal for February. Precipitation-wise, again, relatively average for most of us, minus the western part of Kansas, potentially slightly below normal precipitation values for those areas. Next 3 months, February, March, and April now, and again, looking at slightly below normal temperatures for a good chunk of Nebraska. Otherwise, the rest of Nebraska and Kansas looking at average temperatures. And as far as precipitation totals go, the next 3 months, unfortunately, still kind of looking a little bit on the dry side. Again, most of Nebraska and Kansas looking at slightly below normal precipitation values, that is. And again, the eastern parts of both Nebraska and Kansas looking near average for the next couple of months. Your Grow Almanac here for the week ahead. Normally see a high right around 38. Normal low stands around 17. This week ahead, looking at roughly average totals. I mean, we're talking 39 for the average high, 21 for the average low. So maybe running a tad warmer. Some days better than others here. Again, temperatures in the 40s kicking off our week. Of course, it was a very nice weekend after all, but again, that cold front has come through now. Those temperatures starting to decline a little bit. Again, those temperatures kind of bouncing around some here. Maybe a little moisture chance towards the middle and end of the week, maybe Wednesday night to Thursday, maybe a little bit of light snow possibility. Also watching Friday, but some considerable uncertainty still remains there. Otherwise, your Grow proverb for the week ahead. February gives much snow, a fine summer. It doth foreshow. I guess we got a long ways to go in February yet. Hopefully, maybe get more snow, and of course, maybe get that better summer overall. Let us look at your Grow weather report. Stay tuned next week when once again it'll be time to grow.
Still to come, we remember a meat pioneer. Do you need a college degree to get your start on the farm? Here's a perspective from Iowa.
It takes a lot to run a farm, but an increasing number of farmers are adding another expense, a college degree.
There's a cycle to it. Whenever agriculture is going through a downturn, we always see more enrollment happen.
According to the USDA, more than a third of new farmers have a 4-year degree or higher, compared to just over a fourth of established farmers. Even though the Education Data Initiative says tuition for public universities increased almost 40% over the last 15 years. But ISU agricultural student Lex Castle says he and many other students see it as a necessity despite the price tag.
You know, their dads had to sit them down and say there's not enough money here to feed 2 families, so they get a college degree, and this allows them to go work in the job force for 5-10 years, and then maybe save enough money to be able to buy into the family farm.
It's not impossible to get into farming without a degree, but Castle says it is getting harder, especially if you're not born into an established family operation. And with more technological advancements, experts expect the limited farming positions available to become even more competitive.
regardless of the rising costs. We just are going to have to select some folks who are continuing the legacy of farming and some folks who are connected with the ag industry in other ways.
Other ways being agribusiness, marketing, or animal science.
A pioneer who changed fast food and added value to livestock is remembered. Dr. Richard Mandigo is internationally known for his groundbreaking research that helped shape the industry and even led to the McRib. While he didn't invent the famous McDonald's sandwich, it was his technology that made it possible. He was inducted into the Meat Industry Hall of Fame along with Colonel Sanders and Wendy's founder Dave Thomas. Outside the lab at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, he was a devoted family man known not for the McRib, but hosting gourmet dinners. Dr. Mandigo is survived by his wife of 54 years, plus their children and grandkids. Mandigo was 85. And make sure to join us back here again next time as we see how agriculture makes Nebraska grow.